Dude, he's
Okay,
gonna
I
get
think
his
we
balls
are.
touched by random people too.
I think he is. If I know anything about Amsterdam, it's that. Hello, everybody. This is the weekly Strength Club Q&A. We're kind of doing this like one of the older episodes. We did this. We did a streak of these for a few months, but we were just having a bunch of questions come in, topics that we needed to cover. Rather than just form checks, we would cover like one specific issue. So if you go through the channel, we've done some on all the major lifts, a lot of form things, a lot of programming things, a lot of technique, pain and injury stuff. For this one, I had two things come in over the week talking about ankle mobility, and that came up a bunch in our recent kind of Reddit crawls.
Mhm.
Everyone is just talking about ankle mobility as if it's like a big or important determining factor in the squat. How's it going, cool dude? 70 minus one. Good evening, gentlemen of strength. How's it going? But yeah, so we're doing one of these older school episodes. I'm Alex, and then with me I have Chase. Is that your name?
That is my name. I am
Chase,
Chase.
you are a what type of coach? You're an ending coach?
So I'm a starting strength coach here in Oklahoma City, where I am also the head coach of the Oklahoma City location. So we teach people how to get stronger with barbells. So we go through the squat, the press, the bench, the deadlift, power clean, and then kind of all the other accessory exercises, and we get people stronger.
The relevant accessories like curls, and that's just about it.
Exactly.
Curls, maybe some chin-ups.
Forearm works.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I love forearm work so much.
Hmm.
And the more people I can convince to do forearm work, the better. But yeah, so we do kind of the more introductory stuff on these episodes rather than our weekly ones. We have a pretty devout 300 people indoctrinated into the alt-right barbell club, basically watching our form check stuff. But for these ones, they tend to get more traffic. So we're starting strength can be coaches. We work for a company called Starting Strength. It's a very lengthy kind of onboarding and filtering process. There's a very long platform exam that spans a whole weekend. Chase does those exams. He proctors those exams. And
Hmm.
then there is a board exam or an oral exam where you kind of get grilled for a few hours about all the topics under the sun. Um, I think I may have done the best ever on all of these tests to anyone, I think.
Probably
I,
did.
that's probably what I think. Yeah, that's a very reasonable position to hold.
Hmm.
But yes, so we work for Starting Strength. So these are kind of our credentials. Chase has pressed 405. Chase has some pretty impressive totals. I do a lot of martial arts, things like that.
Hmm.
So we kind of know what we're talking about just a little bit. The topic for today's episode is going to be ankle mobility, like I said before. We have a lot of examples. We're going to talk a lot about anthropometry. We're going to watch a lot of videos, things like that. So we'll just get right to it. Uh, these are things. These are Chase's Instagram, Chase's backup Instagram, my website. If you want an email or if you want your videos on the show, so we're going to be watching user form checks throughout today. If you want your video in here, email that to support@strength.club. And then our quote from our fearless leader, Mark Roboto, you're thinking too hard about this. So we'll pop this over here. Okay, so we got to go over the squat a little bit before we talk about ankle mobility as like a specific fetish on the internet. We have three major angles in the squat: the hip angle, the knee angle, and the back angle. Chase, can you tell us about the hip angle and the back angle? Like, why do people get those confused so easily?
Yeah. So the way we squat, right, we kind of have three criteria that we need to solve. So we want to use the most weight possible, the most muscle mass over the greatest effective range of motion, right? So that kind of tells us that we need to have a more horizontal back angle. Now, this is a little bit determined on anthropometry. So some people are going to be a little bit more leaned over than others, but generally everyone's going to be leaned over with their back angle. Their hip angle is going to be closed relative to their knees, and their knees are going to be more open. So if we go to the other paradigm here, where we were to look at like a front squat, the dude would be more vertical, his back angle almost completely vertical. His hip angle would be open, and his knees would be really closed. Um, so this is, front squats are good if you're going to be an Olympic lifter and you need to train those. But for general strength training purposes, a low bar squat, the one that we teach with a horizontal back angle, hip angle closed, knee angle open, that's how you get stronger.
Yeah, and we'll get to the specifics, kind of like what would be the difference between the high bar squat and then the front squat, like Chase was mentioning, and then why we choose the low bar squat in specific. But then just to kind of relate this back to the ankle mobility thing, this is the ankle right here, everybody, in case you didn't know
Hmm.
where that is, and then we have the ankle influencing the knee influencing the hip, and so on. With the back angle and the hip angle is the amount of hip flexion that you're getting into, so the amount of bend that is between your torso and your femur, your thigh. The back angle is in reference to the floor. So during the rest of this, whenever we say they have a relatively vertical or horizontal back angle, we're talking about that in comparison to the floor, not how much hip flexion they're in. Because there can be some people, let's say they have like a really long torso. They're actually not, let's say they don't have they can have the same exact amount of hip flexion as someone else, but it's going to look like their back angle is much more vertical than the rest. So they can have the
Hmm.
same amount of hip angle, but it'll look like, as compared to someone with a shorter torso, they'll have a much more severe back angle. And then the knee angle, I think, that's relatively fixed, like the actual angle itself, right? Because we don't want
Hmm.
someone going too ass to grass. So let's say if they brought their butt literally all the way down to their ankles, their knee angle would be really closed. We don't want that. We think that's a little bit too deep. And if someone has a higher knee angle, it's going to be too high. They're going to be squatting high. So the knee angle itself is relatively fixed, but the thing that we need to talk about a lot is actually the knee position.
Hmm.
So we'll see some more examples of this coming up, particularly on this guy. So we'll go through things just kind of like what this person looks like, what their anthropometry looks like, and then how that is influencing the squat. And we'll kind of tie this into some videos. So we're going to see a picture of this and then a video version, not of this guy, but another guy with pretty similar anthropometry. Chase, is this lifter from your gym? Have you seen this guy before? He's at one of the franchises.
He is at one of the franchises, but he's either at three locations, possibly four. So if you look at like the gray plates on
Hmm.
the edge there, that's for one of the kind of the founding gyms.
Right.
So he could be at Austin, he could have been at Dallas, Houston. I don't remember him from Houston or Denver. So one of those four.
All right. If you're looking for this guy, that's how you track him down.
Hmm.
Chase, you can see his knee position in relationship to his feet, right?
Yep. So like if we're kind of judging this for those who can't see this, this guy is squatting and his knees are in a position to where his knees and toes are almost aligned, right? And if we look at it too, kind of if we were to move around to the back, we would see like his thighs are in line with his feet. There's no knee valgus or knee varus, or his knee is not tracking along with his toes. So he's in line. He's looking good here with his knee position.
Yeah. So all the images that we're going to see, and then the actual squats themselves, I'm pretty sure we'll double check as it goes on, of course, that they're like good squats. They're not squatting high. They're not balanced away from midfoot, anything like that.
Hmm.
So this guy, if we look at his shin angle, don't be fooled by kind of that line on his pants. It's making it look more inclined than it is. He actually has pretty vertical shins right now, right? So
Hmm.
this guy, if we had to say it in kind of context clues here, he's older. He's squatting high bar. His shoulders are not going to be that mobile, and his ankles aren't going to be that mobile either. So we'll have kind of some comparison images here. So let's say this guy, there's a decent amount of space between his knees and the front of his toes. And then we'll pop to this guy. It's another older gentleman, but who has really good ankle mobility. And then
Hmm.
for him, he's kind of adapted this over time because he has a bad hip. He just had a hip replacement on this, but over years and years of working through it, he's developed super mobile ankles. So if you look at this guy's ankles here, his knees are way the hell out in front of his toes. That's how he has to get to depth. Whereas this guy here, he's holding his knees back more. He has a vertical shin angle, and he's still
Hmm.
squatting to depth. So Chase, how can both of these guys squat to depth if their knees are in such wildly different positions?
So with this guy currently with the knee position where it's generally right above his toes or kind of slightly behind, he's gonna one have to shove out his knees, and also he's gonna have to make the hip crease go below the top of the knee. That's how we're gonna judge if he's at depth or not. So this guy currently he may need to just bend the knees a little bit more, and that's gonna allow him to sink down that extra like half inch to hit that depth.
Hmm.
But in this general configuration, knees out, making your ass go below your knees is generally the cues that we use to get this guy to depth.
What do you think about the torso angle? So like let's compare these two guys. They may be of pretty similar age. I'm not
Hmm.
entirely sure. This guy in the image I want to say is in his early 60s or late 50s. If I had to guess, probably a little bit older for this gentleman.
Hmm.
Um, so in to my eyeballs, this guy here he has a pretty average torso. This guy over here, um, it's kind of average-ish, but there's a
I'd say he's a
drastic
little bit on
difference.
the long side.
Longer side? Okay.
I'd say
So
so.
there's a drastic difference in knee position, and there's a pretty drastic difference in torso angle as well.
Hmm.
Because this guy here in this slide, he's doing low bar. This guy's doing high bar. He's doing high bar, but he's still more leaned over. Why would someone
Hmm.
have to lean over more to kind of keep this whole system in balance, Chase?
So we want the bar to be over the midfoot. So our midfoot is our balance point in the squat. So how we can do that is there is our way of leaning over, shoving our ass back, and putting the load directly over the midfoot. Now, there is a catch to this. So, like for example, if we go back to like that guy who that kind of the older guy in the franchise, let's say this is like one of his warm-ups and he's going to go to 185 instead of 95, what he's doing currently. He may not be where you can see the bar over the midfoot at this position, but him being the lifter and the barbell, the system is in balance over the middle of the foot. But as we see him getting closer to his working set of like 185, the bar is going to be right over the middle of the foot. It has to be because it makes up more of the combined center of mass of the two.
Yeah, these are just kind of basically the constraints that we're working with, or kind of the rules of the squat, is that we think you should be squatting to depth. We think that's
Mm-hmm.
important. We'll say that's one of the rules. The other thing is the bar has to remain over the middle of the foot. The bar over the middle of the foot is a proxy for, quote, combined center of mass over the center of balance in the foot, right? So bar over midfoot, it just shortens that whole sentence. So if this bar right here that this guy's holding weighs, 405 pounds, and then this guy who's holding the bar weighs 185, the combined center of mass is going to really closely approximate where this bar is. And that combined center of mass needs to go up and down in a straight line, right? So like Chase was saying, for homeboy here, it may look like the bar's a little bit forward, but that's because he's only squatting 95 pounds and he probably weighs, 200 or so. Yeah, so the kind of the rules that we need to think about when we're analyzing all of this, it's really just this. It's really just those two things. Is that you need to get to depth, so the kind of the crease of the hip below the top of the knee, and then the bar or the bar of the midfoot. Makes it quite simple, I think. And analyzing the squat, when you know those two things, nothing else betrays it. And then this kind of gets into the meat of the issue, and then why we're talking about this to kind of lay the foundation. We're talking about ankle mobility. The more mobile your ankles are, the more forward your knees can get. When the knees get more forward, it impacts where your hips are. So if the hips can get more forward and closer to the foot, that means your torso is going to get more vertical, right? So we can go back to these two images, these two older guys. This guy, his ankles are relatively immobile, which means his knees are being held back. When his knees are held back, his hips are farther back, and that means he has to lean over more. This gentleman is here. His ankles are super mobile, which means his knees can get very forward, which means his hips can get closer and his chest can stay more vertical. All we're trying to do is keep the bar over the midfoot, and then their bodies are solving this problem with the tools that they're given, or let's kind of say the capacities that they have. So this is why, you don't really need mobile ankles to squat. I work with a few clients who have had like major ACL tears, major ankle breaks from grappling before. And it doesn't matter if their shins are like literally vertical, right? Because they can just lean over more. Do you work with anybody like that, Chase, who just has crap ankles?
No, but knees, yes, but it's kind of almost the same. Whereas like if the knees go too far forward, it's essentially getting into more flexion along with the ankle. But no, not in particular with the ankles.
Yeah, it's like it's basically like when people say, a lot of people think they can't squat to depth, and they'll think it's the hamstrings or the hip
Hmm.
flexors or something like that, or they'll think it's the ankles. It's really not. If you know how to do it and you're sufficiently strong, it's a fun thing to try. Just try and do some squats with your shins totally vertical. It'll feel like the weight is on your heels unless you lean
Hmm.
over a ton, but you can do it. You can get away with a squat to depth, bar over midfoot, while staying shins totally vertical. Um, yeah, I'll have people do that as kind of an accessory movement or kind of like a technique movement if their problem is their knees slide forward the entire time. I'll just say hold your knees back as hard as you can and just learn to squat like that for a little bit. Do some warm up sets like that, practice work with 135, and take
Hmm.
that into your working sets. Um, yeah, so in terms of cues, Chase, when we're teaching the squat, where do we end up recommending the knees go?
Right over the toes. Now,
Do you
again, that's not going to be everyone, but generally we want them to be right over the toes.
So my next question was, do you find that most people will have to hold them back, or will most people have to push them forward?
Oh, definitely holding them back.
Right.
Because the visual of people whenever they think of a squat, they have a high bar or even like something of like a high bar front squat bastardized version of those in their
Hmm.
mind. It's a vertical back because one, they don't want to hurt their back. Two, they're trying to get more quads out of it, so their knees are going to go really far forward. Their butt's going to stay relatively right over their midfoot, or try to at least. And there's a really, really exaggerated vertical, or I'm sorry, horizontal angle to their shin. But of course, we don't need all that because of those criteria that we mentioned earlier. We need to sit back more and exactly. So, like out of these three guys, it's kind of like more the one in the middle that everyone kind of thinks about.
Yeah, people think that two in most people's brains, two is really what they think a squat is.
Hmm.
More cultured gentlemen will oftentimes think that it's the front squat because who would train the back squat? That's very silly. Whereas in reality, we're promoting a position more like number three. Um, you know, and note with number three, the knees are held back a little bit more, the hips are farther behind the midfoot. The guy's leaning over a lot, but I think this is the most important part. He's not rounding into thoracic flexion.
Hmm.
I'll see a lot of squats where people will think they're leaning over, they'll think they're doing number three, but in reality, the knees are still going super far forward and they're just rounding the hell out of their upper back and they're having a hard time with it. So that thoracic extension is very important. We don't want to, forsake that. Um, but the issue really is kind of number two and then number three. Um, so let's say, for example, Chase, if you had someone who had not very mobile ankles and then a very short torso, which one would they end up having to look like more between two and three?
Oh, definitely three.
Yeah. Okay. And then why is that? If you could just walk me through those steps.
So if we have a shorter torso person, so I like to kind of give this analogy of we're trying to either balance a skyscraper, so someone who has a really long torso, or like a one-story house. It's better to have some lean, or rather, the one-story house can have a lot of lean to it, right? It's not going to fall off its foundation. But if you have the Empire, State Building on some sort of tilt, it's going to start to fall, right? So you can't handle too much lean there. Now, if we tie this back into terms of squatting, someone with a short torso is going to lean over more than a person with a longer torso, right? But that affects how their knee position is, right? So the torso, again, is connected from the hips. The hips are connected to the knees via the thigh. All that stuff goes back, right? So as we lean over more, our knees will kind of pull back a little bit too.
Hmm. Yeah. If you lean over, so like let's say for example, if this gentleman, if his torso is inclining forward more, the bar is going forward too. And if his
Hmm.
knees go forward while that happens, it gets forward of the midfoot. Right? So we've broken one of our rules. And then if he tries to stay super vertical and get his knees more forward, they either can or they can't. If they can, I guess that's fine. He's using more of his quad and less of his hips. But if he can't, then his heels are going to come up off the ground, right?
Hmm.
And then that's really bad as well. So we'll talk about some solutions to this problem, but we'll go through some more examples here. Um, this guy, he's more in line with the first older gentleman. I just wanted to say that this happens to older and younger people as well. His ankles aren't super mobile. His knees cannot get very far forward at all. And he has a little bit of a shorter torso. So if he posted this form check on the internet, people are going to be like, bro, you're leaning over way too much.
Hmm.
That's all people are going to say. But like Chase was saying, this is just kind of what happens. I really like that analogy that you did, Chase, with the houses.
Hmm.
Is that new? Have you been saying that for a while?
No, I've been saying that.
Nice. Okay, cool. Um, yeah, balancing a skyscraper, leaning with a skyscraper, very hard. Um,
Hmm.
so most people, though, we always say it in the teaching progression, like you have to lean over more than you think, something to that effect, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, because a lot of people will end up in this position because they either won't have great ankle mobility or they'll have a little bit of a shorter torso, and we need
Hmm.
to teach them to squat with their hips. Um,
Yeah,
let's
for
see
those
who's.
also too, like that are not familiar with squatting and stuff like that, you got to think there's a lot of posterior muscle groups that we're trying to utilize in the squat, right?
Hmm.
So whenever you're kind of squatting, just like how you're left up to in your own devices, you're gonna think about the muscles that you see in front of you. So your quads,
Yeah.
maybe your calves, and your chest. All that stuff is gonna have to come into play instead of you thinking about leaning over, shoving your ass back, and using all that muscle group in order to squat.
Yeah, most people think like squat is predominantly, and I think this is kind of an artifact of this. For a long
Hmm.
time in culture, squat was like just quads. It
Yeah.
was quads, quads, quads. Kind of pumping iron, early bodybuilding things. It was like sissy squats, hack squats, get as much quad as you can out of it. And then the more strength oriented low bar squat, your quads are certainly. What is Rip saying? He's like your quads are just along for the ride. The hips are doing everything. Have
Something
you heard
like
that
that.
before? Yeah.
Yeah, but like even then, like if you think like if we look at number three, and this is like he's coming up out of the bottom in this scenario, but like halfway up, so a little bit higher up, his knees are straightening, and what straightens the knees? The quads. So the quads are still getting a lot of work done in the
Hmm.
squat. If you never really think that that's possible, In this configuration, then I'd suggest like you do some heavier squats or like even like a set of 10, and you're gonna feel some some quad
Exactly. Yeah.
involvement there.
Yeah. Okay. So some more examples. This is just an ankle stretch. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we're throwing an older lady in the mix, kind of
Hmm.
an analog to this gentleman, but with a little bit of a different kind of joint angle. So it looks like on this one, this guy's leaning over a good bit because he has to. It looks like she is relatively vertical, like her chest position is a lot higher. It looks like
Hmm.
the bar is higher up off the ground. So she's kind of in an interesting position. This one I don't think happens too often. You'll kind of see like average or like fair to poor ankle mobility with a longer torso. So the knees kind of have to be held back a little bit, but the torso is long enough to get the bar back over midfoot. I've noticed for people like this, they'll feel like the weight is on their heels, even if it looks like it's balanced completely over midfoot. Um, and then they just can't really get they can't get their knees much more forward than they are.
Hmm.
Um, so when you're looking at this lady squat, Chase, anything popping out to you?
It's just the back angle a little bit too, and then also the high bar too.
Hmm. Yeah. So like you'll notice, and it's kind of as you work with more people and as they squat more and more, a lot of people can't get into low bar day one,
Hmm.
and if they can, it's going to be pretty wide. Like even if I take a few weeks off of squatting for whatever reason, injury, tweak, something like that, and I get back to it, that's tight as hell. It's
Hmm.
something that needs to be practiced. So here are just some variations that like we wanted to go over with uh, joint angles on on a very drawn out method, and then now we'll just kind of see some of them in action as we look at some videos. How are your squats going, Chase? Anything happening exciting in your squat
I
life?
haven't really been pushing the squats too heavily. Just been focusing more on the front squats. So I'm competing here in Olympic lifting. So my focus is kind of shifted towards that. So I'm prioritizing the snatch, the clean and jerk, the front squat, all the Olympic lifts to in order for me to get better at my sport now. So back squats are still in the mix. They're just not as frequently in my training. So this is it's been kind of weird, but I've kind of grown to like front squats. But in the past, I fucking hate them.
Yeah. I just the managing the rack position. It takes me
Yeah,
so long just to get comfy with front squats in a training block that it's like you just either have them in all the time or you forget about them completely. Um,
exactly.
so this gentleman is doing some front squats. He has really good ankle mobility. His low bar squat is in the low fours. I want to say it's like 410, 415 for 4x4 right now.
Hmm.
He just tweaked his back recently, so we're kind of cycling in some front squats just to give him something to do, keep it light. And then we just give you a kind of a real world version of what that black and white image was before. He has a really textbook bottom position. I think I'm
Hmm.
even a little bit high. Yeah. Yeah. So things to note about this bottom position: the knees are decently far forward, chest is really high. Any complaints you see about the squat, Chase, in terms of bottom position?
Um, I like his stance just a little bit narrow, but
Okay.
it looks pretty damn good. Like I would say like he needs a little bit more of a vertical angle, and that's just becoming or more vertical back angle, and that's just due to his rack mobility, right? So
Right.
if your rack kind of sucks, especially like for me, whenever I was first kind of getting into this, like my shoulders were real tight, so I would have to kind of just have a more horizontal back angle on the front squat. And the problem with
Hmm.
that is you can't hang on to the bar at that point. Um,
Yeah, it'll fall off.
it's
Yeah,
just
he
yeah.
starts pinkies on and then pinkies pop off as time goes on. So
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. Whenever I bust out the front squat after a while of not using it, it's like two fingers. It's bad.
Yeah, it fucking sucks.
Yeah, it's real bad. Um, but yeah, so in terms of joint angles, we're gonna see. We'll pause this at the bottom again. Everybody, just get this in your brain. Boop. Front squat, really good back extension, knee super far forward. And then we'll compare this to another one. Let's see who's bending over a lot here. Okay. This is the same guy who we saw in that freeze frame, but now we're just going to see that moving in action now. So
I wonder how this came to be about like, oh man, dude, your ankles are fucking tight as shit.
well, yeah,
Like,
we'll
why
talk about
not?
that. I think that's
Okay.
very
Some
interesting.
lore, some myths and
Yeah, yeah.
storytelling there.
It's like boomer lore that has somehow like indoctrinated younger people into
Yeah,
thinking that. Yeah. So same bottom position. I mean, Chase, do you think it's just a little bit too deep?
I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah. frankly, I don't mind that level of depth.
But
Yeah,
no,
too
it
deep by
looks.
textbook for sure.
But our analysis of, like, bar being over the midfoot, back angle being horizontal, knee position, staying in the hips, all that stuff as he comes up, he's doing a really good job of that.
Sick. So like, look at how leaned over your boy looks here. You know, like
Hmm.
it looks so drastically different than what we were seeing on the front squat. And
Hmm.
then now the guy that we were seeing before this in the blue shirt doing the front squat, Nate, he has like a rather long torso and then short little meaty legs. So he has shorter legs, longer torsos, and he's doing a front squat. That's the most exaggerated it'll get. And it's still vertical. It's very vertical. And Chase said he wants it even more vertical to tell you
Hmm.
about the purpose of that sort of squat. Whereas this guy here, shorter torso, doing low bar, it's effectively making his torso even shorter as compared to high bar. And then look at how leaned over he has to get to finish this rep. We'll finish this one out. He got a little bit too chesty on that last one. What do you think, Chase?
Hmm.
Am I
Yeah,
seeing
just
that
a
or am
little
I
bit.
hallucinating?
I could say just like the bar position, maybe like he needs to encroach his grip a little bit, but there I think
Hmm.
he kind of just got off a little bit off balance. But this in general, though, he looks pretty damn good with his hip drive and staying constant with his back angle.
Nice. Watch this one more time. Yeah, I think that last thing you said was good. Constant in the back angle, because it seems like
Hmm.
he's waving his chest back up to finish it.
Yeah,
So if the back angle's constant, he'll stand straight up under it. Yeah.
and I kind of see that a lot too. Is like people always are like, when do I need to stop using my hips? It's like, well, really never. Like if you just keep extending your hips, you're going to stand up all the way. So don't even worry
Right.
about when your chest is involved. Like basically
Yeah.
your chest and hips are one thing, and that's your back. So just make your back horizontal, and then it's going to stay horizontal for as long as possible, and then it's eventually just magically comes up to vertical.
Yeah, the second that someone starts thinking about like when do I bring my chest back up, it just
Fucks it
almost
up.
taints the whole thing,
Yeah.
right? Because then they'll either send the knees forward again, they'll wave the chest back, something weird like that. Now this guy, he has a bunch of tattoos all over his upper back. This is one of my clients, so he doesn't low bar squat anymore because it's just been fucking up his skin, which is an interesting problem to have. He was the first
Hmm.
guy who I've run into with that. Yeah, you can see all the tattoos all over the place. But he's using a kabuki bar and it's set in the low bar position. For those of you who use the kabuki transformer bar, it's pretty interesting, but it doesn't feel exactly the same. So we're gonna look at this torso angle with this crazy weird bar.
So is he getting like nude tattoos done on his back? Is that why he's doing it
Yeah, so
currently,
he's
or
getting like a big kind of almost like
back
a
piece?
yakuza style entire
Oh,
back
that's
done.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty masochistic. Oh, by the way, Chase, this was really funny. So this guy, I've been putting in some more direct arm work for him. He's very tiny. He's a pretty tiny guy.
Yeah.
Um, and he was like, "Hey,
Fuck.
bless you." He's like, "I think I'm gonna
Thank
have to
you.
pull out the arm work out right now. I'm juggling a lot right now." And I was like, "Okay, if you're super busy, just let me know what your schedule is. We'll figure out a time slot to put this in."
Hmm.
And he was like, "No, I'm not busy. Like I've literally started juggling." So he started juggling clubs and balls,
Yeah.
and
So
apparently
his
it's very
arms are just fucking gassed afterwards
yeah.
or
So he was
something?
like, "Yeah, my arms." He's like, "If I do too many chin ups, then I'll be really shitty at juggling later." And I'll be like, "That's
Wow.
a very fair
That's
complaint."
interesting, man. That is interesting.
Yes. How do you feel about these squats, Chase?
They're not bad. I think he's kind of getting too bent over though. So
Mhm.
yeah, so don't freak out as I say this because we've been saying like people need to be leaned over more. But if you watch his knees as he's coming up, they shoot instantly back, and his butt instead of drives up, it goes back slightly. Like
Right. So this is the bottom, and you're saying the knees are going to go backwards.
exactly.
Okay.
So now what does this do to his back angle? It actually makes
Yeah.
it a little bit even more horizontal.
Yeah.
So just like we were talking about previous, the thing needs to be constant. So it doesn't need to diminish and go more into a vertical back angle or increase the angle and go into even a more horizontal back angle. Because at this
Hmm.
point, there's a lot of leverage on the back that doesn't really need to be there. So he's at a disadvantage as he's going to squat heavier. Like
So
right
would
now,
you
he's
tell this
strong.
guy to think more front squat or more back squat?
I wouldn't tell him to maybe fix the back angle. I'll just cue it from the standpoint of the knees.
Okay.
So if he thinks about keep his knees in place, or even think about using your quads as you stand up,
Mhm.
instead of thinking about the hip drive here, and I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, also props to this guy. I'm pretty sure this is his front door, so it's just front
Yeah, I was
door.
gonna ask that, like, if someone, like, broke in and just saw him squatting, like, they just slowly,
They're
like, just
like, "What
close the
the
door and
hell?"
be like, "Fuck it."
They're like, "Sorry for interrupting." Yeah. Um, but yeah, so this is an interesting one about the torso because it's like he has a pretty average build, if anything, maybe even on the long side a little bit in the
Uh-huh.
torso. Um, but this is kind of where we see this is kind of one of the overall arching, principles, or no, that's principles, but points that I want to make here is that it's really just technique. It's technique and coaching. Your ankle
Mhm,
mobility has jack shit to do with it.
mhm.
Because this guy has normally mobile ankles. He's using a bar that should theoretically let him get more vertical, but from the technique, his knees are still shooting back immediately, and he's getting really bent over as it gets heavy. Um, yeah, so someone may literally squat doctor this on the internet and then say it's your ankle mobility that's preventing you from keeping your knees forward. Whereas in
Yeah.
reality, we know his knees can get there because we see them getting there. He just needs to keep them in that position.
Mhm.
But yeah, Chase. So this bar, I wonder if I can see on any freeze frame, but so it has these settings in this wheel right there to kind of change
Mhm.
the position of the weights, and then there's also like an arm off of that where you can do the severity. So there's like a
Yeah.
setting 1, which is really close, and there's setting 4. If you put it on like low bar 4,
Mhm.
and they have one that's even called like good morning or hip hinge. If you put it on hip hinge 4, it feels like you're squatting with the weight literally on your tailbone because it's so
Almost like a
far behind
Mars
you.
bar or some shit like that?
Yes, and if you put it on front squat 4, it feels like you're holding the weight up like this. You're like, "Oh god." But they're
Damn.
really fun, dude. You gotta find one and give it a try.
I heard
Um,
those bars are expensive as fuck though too.
yeah, so the Kabuki tranny bar, the transformer bar,
Yeah.
I think I the cheapest it ever got on sale was like 4 or 500 something.
Jeez,
Um,
man.
Yeah, I'm a big shill for Kabuki. I try to get people get the Kabuki deadlift bar and then the transformer bar. Yeah, they're just fun. Okay, so that's it. We talked about that guy's squat. Who else? We're gonna throw in a random MJDC deadlift because he sent us a deadlift.
Didn't they make like a new deadlift bar that's like 27 millimeters, but like super, super long, like 9 foot or some shit like that?
Yeah, so that's what I pulled my
Yeah, yeah,
recent
you were talking about that. Yeah,
5
that's
on.
right.
It's hilarious. Like it felt like, so 500 normally it's like a 10 out of 10 grinder for me and I have to peek
Yeah.
into it. I really didn't peek into this one and it felt like I could laugh halfway through the rep. It moved
Jeez.
like 315 does on a stiff bar. Um yeah, it was comical.
So what we got like 405 here or something like
Yeah,
that?
I think this is a flat 405. Okay, so he sent us 2 videos in the docket, so we're going to see what these end up looking like. Wait, I got to shift this. All right, that's better. Okay. So this is a single attempt from our boy MJ. Not a squat at all. His ankle mobility seems to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Chase?
Kind of looks like his knees are kind of shooting back a little bit
Mm-hmm.
right there. So he's getting even a little bit more pulled over. So he's losing thoracic extension. The bar is kind of drifting away from him. So MJ, you're gonna have to think about keeping your knees inside of your elbows a little bit longer, right?
Yeah.
And then the other big thing is like, are you chalking up? Uh, did the grip clearly it slipped out of your hand? So do you
Mm-hmm.
try something else with your grip? Mixed
Yeah.
grip, hook grip, straps, something of that sort.
Yeah, this looks like double overhand. It could be hook though. But yeah,
Yeah.
so he's just kind of shooting himself backwards. We'll see what the second one is. This could be a successful one. We do not know. Or it could be him on a different day because it's a different shirt now. So unless he changed shirts, it been work out. But we got you, MJ.
So this is what, like 400 or
This
395 or
one's
something?
dark, but I see like a 25,
I think
so
this is
365,
400.
385. Yeah, I think this is 4. So he may have tried 4 and then cuz he sent these in a little bit farther apart.
Mm.
I think this is hook grip.
I don't know. Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's tucking his fingers like it's hook grip.
See, that's the weirdest thing though. 5 pounds, and like this thing didn't even look like it was slipping remotely. So I don't
Yeah.
know if he had chalk or what, but
So I can visibly see chalk on his hands in this one. I could not in the other one. That could just be a lighting thing,
mm,
though. Yeah, if anything, it's probably a programming thing. I mean, he could have like truly, had a tiny peak here, and then he tried 405 the next week, and it's just not in the
yeah,
cards,
just fucked
because
him up.
you're just still fucked up from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this was a good example of what Chase said to do. So keeping,
Yeah, you did really good on
yeah,
this one.
exactly. Yeah. All right, so he knows how to do it. Did you see any problems with his ankle mobility, Chase?
No, none that I could see.
Okay, all right. It could still be there lurking in the background.
It's always you
Um,
got to think about it in the back of your mind.
yeah, we got one from Leo Saad, our boy from Brazil, I think, with his big beard, no mask on. Leo normally wears a mask.
It's good.
He's squatting a tad high.
So that's
Chase,
kind of
what's
that's
wrong? Is this ankle mobility that's going wrong?
yeah.
What's
Well,
the
I was
problem
going
here?
to point this out. This is very interesting. So if you look at it, he's actually increasing his ankle mobility, right? But there's an issue with that. His fucking heels are coming up, and he's about to fall forward.
Yeah.
So him working on his ankle mobility here isn't going to be the best thing. What Leo needs to do though is sit his ass back more and think about getting his weight back into his heels as he stands up. So like I kind of cue people this sometimes: stand up like a stripper. So you're going to show your butt as you come up.
That's a good one. Stand up like a stripper.
Hmm.
Hmm. Do you only use that with guys? Do you use that to women as well? Do women
No, only
understand it
only
better?
guys. No, I used it with a few women, and they do kind of understand it a little bit
They're
better.
like,
With
oh,
some,
of course.
yeah, with like
Yes.
it's funny because like it's usually bigger guys that I have to say that to because they just kind of always drift into their knees and stuff like that.
Right.
I'm like, look, dude, you need to stand up like a stripper, and they're like, oh, like this. I'm like, no, you would be like the worst stripper on the fucking planet. You need to throw your ass back. So I have to like
Uh,
grab them by the hips and actually yank their
right.
butt back. But with
Next
females,
class, we're gonna go see some strippers so that you can get
exactly.
this in your
We'll take
brain.
a field trip.
Yeah, class field trip. Yeah. So God, I think, or excuse me, Leo, widen the stance out a tad. This guy's interesting. Shorter femurs, or I would say average femurs, but longer shins, shorter torso.
Yeah.
Um, so because he has a shorter torso, like we said before, he's going to have to lean over more. So this is a reticent to lean over. He needs to lean over more, and then to push his hips backwards behind him. So if we look at, let's just say, we'll do the first rep again because I think that was actually one of his best. It was still high, but it was one of his best.
Mhm.
Hmm? So is that what is that? Is that depth high?
From this angle, it looks like he maybe had just hit it, but to be on the
Just
safe
barely.
side, yeah, I would still tell this guy like you need to go half an inch deeper, and
Yep.
he's going to solve that by not drifting so far forward. And if he sits back a little bit, he'll be able to kind of feel his hips getting to the proper position.
Okay, so we'll look at I'm going to pause at the bottom of the next kind of next available rep here. Boom. Is that enough knee flexion? So like let's say for example if we just took his freeze frame but tilted the floor, is that enough knee flexion to produce depth?
If we were to tilt him,
Like let's say like if you could just cut off his torso and if you're just looking at someone's
yeah,
legs, is that enough knee flexion for depth?
no, probably not.
Okay. Yeah. So just a tad bit more.
Hmm.
So let's say ankle position. Do you think the ankle mobility is the limiting factor here?
No, I think he's just drifting forward, and it's his position of balance. So,
Yeah.
if we go back to like that chart that we were first kind of looking to, here's some physics terms here. Like we have basically a bunch of leverage that we're working against, right? So, and the easiest way to kind of feel this is if you pick up a 10-pound plate and you throw it way out in front of you at arm's length, can you hold that thing there for a while? No. But if you could do the same plate and you hug it up to your chest, you can hold it there all day long, right? So that system that I'm kind of talking about is just it's moment, right? So as we are squatting, we are basically balancing ourselves over the midfoot. But if we tilt it just like how Leo did here, there's a little bit of an unnecessary moment arm as he goes forward. So he needs
Hmm.
to get back to where there's no moment on the whole entire system, and there's no again unnecessary leverage that he has to work against.
Yeah. One thing it's very important to note is that people will not continue to move through positions they are not balanced in.
Exactly.
So unless you're like jumping for something and you know the point of the task is to become unbalanced because you're leaping through the air, let's say if you're like on your toes and you're physically falling forward, people will not go deeper. It's like an instinctive self-preservation thing. If people are really on the heels, they won't just like suicide kamikaze backwards and fall behind them. It's incredibly rare for that to happen. If the weight is forward or behind midfoot, people will go as far down as they can until they get to a personal point in their head where they're like, all right, if I go any deeper, I'm going to fall. They may not consciously think that, but that's what's going through their lizard brain, and then they come back up. So Leo here, he's falling onto the toes, not because his ankles aren't mobile enough, but because he's not using his hips enough. He's not leaning over enough. And again, like this is a pretty typical squat where people will see the heels coming up off the ground and they'll think, oh, it's ankle mobility.
Yep.
Ankle mobility every time. Whereas it's really not the issue at all. I got just a funny video angle from a guy. I wanted to show you this, Chase.
Is it like his balls or some shit like that? Oh, nice.
Yes, watch this very carefully. Let us know what you think.
Oh, did he have a hip shift a little bit?
He's moving his hips just a tad. Yeah, on the way down, he's sitting to his right leg.
Yeah. Man, if you just had a little bit more ankle mobility, that could help that hip shift.
The hip shift would have been fine. So the grip looks fine. I think the bar is a little bit high, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think these are to depth, Chase? I don't think they are.
No, and this is probably the hardest position you're going to see about judging depth. That's why, like, if you go to like a meet, usually the front judge or the head judge is in front of you. They don't really call meet for depth. It's the side judges, right? But even with that in mind, if you look at, let's say, his positioning at the bottom, his hip crease is nowhere near, right there. Like I can see like where his shorts are bunched up, kind of like where his growing is. That position is still higher than where his knee is.
Yeah, if you kind of pretend you can just X-ray in and look at his femur, it's going to be slightly inclined up here. And again, it's not necessarily ankle mobility. It's not really the issue here. This one, the knees are sufficiently far forward. The stance may be a little bit wide. If we look here at his right foot, his foot is rolling in like this. So some lifting shoes would definitely help you out. This is KF Eni or K Feeney, by the way. But yeah, so bar needs to be a little bit lower. He needs to lean over more, use more of his hips, and he'll be totally fine here. That hip shift that we noticed, Chase. Do you like to do anything about that? What do you think about that?
It depends if someone is in pain and I can see that. So if, like, let's say this guy is squatting and his left side is just fucking always nagging on him and he's been tweaking it recently before coming to see me, I'm going to lay him down and kind of measure his legs to make sure that he doesn't have a leg length discrepancy, either femoral or tibial. And at that point, we adjust his stance accordingly. But if he has a shift and it's not really causing him any pain, I'm still going to probably call it out. I got to triage again what I need to fix in his squat, this one being depth first. And then probably after a while, we're going to work on, hey, you need to think about going down on your left side a little bit more as a cue point.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, like, it's the intervention it's cue based, right? You can fix a tremendous amount through that. You don't necessarily need to immediately switch exercises. You don't need to do a one-legged dumbbell deadlift, anything like that. Okay, so just another example of that kind of knees forward position. We'll look at someone who has stellar ankle mobility and a bad hip, and then we're going to see what that does to the torso angle. Let's start this over. I missed that first rep. Yeah, so coming off a hip replacement, he's very reticent to bend over, but his ankles are just like the weirdest, loosest ankles you'll see in the whole world.
Oh my gosh, man. They're like double jointed.
So there's a very slight amount of rolling on the inside of the foot here, even with lifting shoes. But the boy just has Gumby ankles. So look at how crazy far forward these things are getting. And then in kind, his torso angle is like this. Right.
Yeah.
So the past two people we've been saying they need to get more leaned over. This guy is he's all the way up there. I don't remember how the rest of the set goes. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, pretty samey. He can't really widen his stance out much because that's the hip again. But these are so the last rep maybe even is just a touch high. What else do you think about these, Chase?
Man, it's just if we can get him to use his hips a little bit more, it'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's going to be hard because I don't know if this guy still feels pain, if he inclines his back a little bit more, or it's just just something in his mind about it. But um, if anything, too, I would maybe put his toe angle in just a little bit to kind of help with like the foot rolling a little
Mm.
bit. Um, but other than that, that may be it.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes you'll run into those. Remember the constraints that we talked about earlier on in the slideshow? There's a vague amount of them because it's lifter to lifter as well. The ones that the universe is putting on you is midfoot balance and depth.
Mhm.
The rest of the constraints are like, does your guy have a bum hip? Can he get the bar in low bar position? Does he have a back tweak? Does he always get back tweaks when he leans over too much, regardless of weight? Things like
Yep.
that. Those are the extra constraints on the system. And then this is a good example of someone who has like super mobile ankles, but bad hip, doesn't like to lean over much. Um, let's see, we got another one from the end of November coming in here.
Dude, our chat is dead. Where is everyone at?
Sometimes this happens. It's very possible that there are messages in the chat. It's also possible that no one has said anything.
Hmm.
Could be
Except
either
cool
way,
dude.
Chase. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool dude 69. Yes, if the chat is working, someone please type any letter. But yeah, so this is from. Do you remember this guy, Chase? He sent in a few videos across time. He puts this nice label on what he's doing, which I appreciate a lot.
Think so.
Alex, how's it going, Alex?
Oh, nice. Okay, Alex here.
LOL.
Good. That comforts me.
Comforting. Yeah, I remember whenever we used to do these more educationally ones, the chat's super dead. But whenever it's form checks, people are just shit talking each other the whole time.
Yeah, they
So
are.
you gotta figure out what you like. So previously, this guy's issue was he was leaning over way too much. So we told him in the past to kind of pick a little bit of a higher chest position, a little bit less lean. So we'll see what you think, Chase.
Well, he kind of exacerbated it a little bit.
Yes, he is exaggerating this a good bit.
So, I mean, the back needs to stay rigid. So I think that's what we were kind of cueing him to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so think of it as like the hips and knees are kind of the motor here. They're going to impart the force to the barbell via the spine, right? So that's why we need the rigidity in his spine to be held. Now, what this guy's doing is he's changing his gaze a little bit to where he's affecting his back angle. That's not how you keep it rigid, right? So his gaze needs to be about 4 or 5 feet out in front of him, still looking down, but he needs to think of a different cue in order to set his thoracic spine. So like his
Mm-hmm.
nipples poke out, or he's trying to spread his chest apart, and aliens popping out of his chest. Like those are kind of some ways that I cue it. Bar rolls down your back, something of that sense, right?
Right.
But the eyes has to stay set in their position, otherwise this will kind of mess with your balance and the back angle too much.
Chase, did you see we have two Alexes?
Oh, sweet.
And me. That's three Alexes. Fuck.
Oh, dude, this is like a
God
planets
damn, man.
aligning event.
You're getting
This is an
3v1 right now,
astronomical event.
Chase. Yeah, so this guy, he's picked his gaze up and he's falling onto his toes, then he's going a little bit too far forward. Not terribly much so. Like these are serviceable. He'll probably go to
Mhm.
310 and 315 and so on. But it's a little bit of a longer term change. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where he's looking, frankly, in this one.
He's kind
Is
of
this
changing.
his face is kind of up. He has a really high chin position. I'm not
Mhm.
entirely sure where the eyes are for this. Um, ankle mobility. Ankle mobility. We have to mention it on every form check, Chase. What do you think?
I give him a good B
A
on my
B?
grading scale. Yeah,
Okay, all right. A
I would
B
like a
out
little
of
bit
10.
more.
We would like more. Fucking slut. All right. Who else do we have going on here? We like to front squat. Oh yeah, John Gloria, by the way. We've seen this squat before. This is a replay, but we're just going to show this for a single. As for more examples of
Oh,
ankle
fuck
mobility.
yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to use this as a segue because this gentleman, John, I believe he may have his lifters on yet, but he's made like kind of ghetto lifters by putting a board under his heels. He's supported the board by using these dumbbells, um, and we'll see how this impacts kind of his knee position. Fine single. Yeah, so John's problem before, I should have pulled up a video from a while ago as well, is that his knee position would be super, super far back.
Hmm.
Whereas he's given himself a little bit of a boost forward on the knees now, plus a lifting shoe, and he can tilt farther forward. So we'll go back to the slideshow. I had a few other things that I wanted to cover. Chase, what do people do if they really care about their ankle mobility? What can they do chronically, like over the long term?
Actually get lifting shoes. So that you pointed that out a little bit.
Yeah.
And lifting shoes, again, they're not going to really help too much with ankle mobility or any of that shit. But what it does, it helps you find midfoot a little bit easier too. Because
Hmm.
of that slight inclination of your shins that you get from that elevated heel really helps. And also the rigidityness of the shoe, all that stuff, the arch support that makes for finding balance and staying in balance a lot easier.
Yeah. So the shortest term fix, like if you find someone who's like, I had both of my ankles or my Achilles tendons cut by an ex girlfriend and I'm permanently crippled, he's going to need like a higher lifting shoe. Some of the highest, there may be some that are higher, but the Reebok Legacy is very high. Some people even put
Mhm.
sole inserts in the Reebok Legacy. That one, I think the default or like the store brand or just not the default. What's the word I'm looking for? The original heel height for the Reebok Legacy, it's 3/4 of an inch, Chase, or is it one?
I want to say it's one for the
I think
legacy.
it's okay. Yeah, the
It's pretty
Legacy
damn
is
close to an
one.
inch.
Yeah, it looks like a high heel. And then the flatter version is like a Metcon, for example.
Mhm.
Um, Notice me, Judo Senpai. Thought Slayer, you getting on the mats, man? Are you doing adult karate to people? Um, yes, I've broken up with judo over the past week because I've broken my nose. So every time we're doing live work, I'm getting headbutted immediately, and it's very uncomfortable because everybody knows my nose is broken. Um, but yeah, so if you have someone who has super mobile ankles, but they still want a stable shoe, would you put them in something that's like a Legacy, or where would you put them in, Chase?
No, just a standard lifting shoe.
Yeah, just a standard one, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch is totally
Mhm.
fine. The flattest one is like a CrossFit Metcon. The highest one is a Reebok Legacy. Um, so just to be clear, if you feel like you have, insufficiently mobile ankles, that is going to be the higher heel because it's going to get your knee position more forward, and then it'll make the rest of the squat more desirable for yourself. Um, so over the long term, I think people neglect calf work. Um, Everybody wants big calves, but like your whole body gets more flexible and limber with training. So the best loaded stretch you can do for your entire lower body is the squat. You know,
Mhm.
your quads are getting stretched, hamstrings are getting stretched, inner thighs getting stretched, your calves are as well. Um, if you feel like you need a little bit more, like if you do a very calf intensive sport, some calf work's probably not the end of the world, at least just stretching it out a good bit. Um, and then there are direct stretches in the Olympic lifting world. Let's see.
Mhm.
Here we go. This one's super common. If my ankles are feeling tight from practice before, if I was doing ankle locks or heel hooks the day before, my ankles are tight. I'll sit into this one. I won't have such a amazing physique as this guy will. Um, Chase, is this what your belly looks like? What does your belly look like?
No, I don't look like John North with his gut like that.
Is this John North?
Yeah, it's John North.
Who's John? Who the hell is John North?
He's the dude who fucking screams on the platform and like slams bars and shit like that.
Oh, this is him with his beautiful belly.
Yeah, this was back in the day before he got all like non-yelling and stuff like that.
Okay, understood. All right, I got to do some research into John North now. Very porn starry name, John North.
Yeah, have you never heard of this guy? Like
No.
in the
Mm-mm.
in the early 2000s, him and like Donnie Schenkel, Glenn Pinley, and a bunch of other guys from like Cal Strength.
Mm-hmm.
They're big in Olympic lifting, and I mean those guys were strong. Don't get me wrong, but he just kind of came with like a platform presence that just seemed really showboaty and just kind of annoying
Was he
sometimes.
amazing at Olympic lifting?
He was pretty good. I forgot what he competed in, but I think like his best lifts are like pretty close to a 200-pound clean and jerk. So he's probably like 190, 180, somewhere around there. And then like a snatch, like 150, 160, somewhere around there.
I looked up his name. I looked up John North Olympic lifting. 7 years ago, there was a Reddit post. Why is John North so controversial? Some of them are just
Kind of
cool.
just,
Yeah, it
yeah.
basically just seems like everyone's saying he's a little bit of a weenie. Regardless, he has very mobile ankles. Very
Hmm.
mobile ankles. Um, so if I ever run into someone who is just kind of an older guy, is very stiff, and I can tell that like if they want to do a power clean, if they're doing any sort of like a lot of my guys do some sort of sport, so I'll have to take these things into consideration past just kind of normal lifting. If I need their ankles or calves in better shape, I'll have them sit into this one pretty frequently. Like if you're doing your power cleans and then you're done and your ankles feel a little bit tight from all the jumping and slamming, sit into this for a while. You can put 135 on the bar and just stretch the hell out of your ankles. I think this is a great stretch to do, but it's a long-term change. It is not a short one. Like it'll take months over months over months to see noticeable improvement on that. Whereas the best thing you can do is just add 200 pounds to your squat, add whatever you can to your squat, and then everything will get more flexible because it has to under that sort of load. What do you think about the not caring option, Chase? Do you think that's valid?
I think that's probably like my go-to. Like,
Yeah.
you got to think like, so all the videos that we looked at, like mind our silliness and all of our shit that we were kind of talking about with the ankle mobility, like the big things that we were pointing out was balance, staying leaned over, using our hips, and stopping the knees. All that shit corresponds into like what people think is ankle mobility. That stuff is way harder to keep. It is that needs to actually be fixed presently instead of the small shit that you're kind of seeing. And again, we kind of tell people who are kind of first time coaching is that they'll pick on the small stuff and actually look at the big picture here where it's like, no, this guy he's drifting onto his toes just like how Leo was, so he needs to sit back more instead of doing 5 different exercises to help his ankles in order for him to sit back. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you can do a 20-minute prolonged ankle warm up before your squats, but it's not going to help.
No.
If you stretch it out with very heavy loads over very many months, it'll start to do something for you, but it's not going to take the place of just more squatting. The point that Chase got across well in the beginning, and I'll reiterate it here, is that we just saw a bunch of people with varying different amounts of ankle mobility and varying different amounts of anthropometry squat. Almost all of them squatted to depth. Almost all of them did very good jobs. Didn't have incredibly major complaints. I think Leo was the worst one. Sorry, Leo. Fix your damn squat. Actually, maybe K Feeney was. K Feeney with the hip shift and Leo. They're fighting for
pretty bad.
For squats that need to be fixed. But with the rest of them, even for Leo and for K Feeney, the ankle mobility is not the issue. Regardless of what your ankle mobility is, you can squat with it. It's just a matter of where you're putting your torso, where you're putting your knees. I think people like to pathologize this because it's way easier than coaching the movement. It's just something that you can just say to a dude and being like, oh man, ankle mobility, right? That's the reason I'm being shitty. Like even if someone's not telling you, but if you're looking for your own reason, if you have something that you can just kind of pin your problems to, it makes handling them a lot easier. You can like chase the ankle mobility dragon. You can say a bunch of shit about it, being like, oh man, this is a problem I need to fix. Or if you're Squat University, you can just try to trick people into thinking that mobility is 100% of everyone's problems.
And make a lot of money from it.
Make a lot of money, yeah. I would say the only time I think mobility stuff comes into play is very specific positional things. Like Chase, for example, like when you started getting acclimated to overhead work, was mobility an issue?
No.
So like what was it in terms of time just holding it there? Like you could get your arms back there, but what was kind of the big thing with holding the bar overhead for the squat?
For the snatch rather, it's actually it's that position that we were kind of looking at with John North, where I'm actually sitting into the bottom with a more vertical back angle. And staying in balance and stuff like that. So that I do that stretch currently where like I put the bar on my knees and kind of really get into a deep.
Just for like 500 pounds.
No, I use a pretty good weight though, enough to where like I can really feel the stretch. Like and to go back off of what you were saying is like you got to look at the movement, right? So if the moving involves like you doing a bunch of dynamic stuff with your joints, you maybe need a stretch. Whereas like the squat and other stuff that we have in our arsenal, not so much.
Nick, you popping in for the last 2 minutes of the stream? Son of a bitch. Oh, classic Nick. Yeah, go back and watch this. Nick has decent ankle mobility. I've always wanted, Nick is one of my guys. I want him to get lifting shoes, but he's never, I don't push it because his ankle mobility is specifically fine. He can squat to depth. He can do everything. He doesn't necessarily need them. He's good. But yeah, I think if we'll go back to it, we'll go back to the finishing point for ankle mobility here, everybody. Not care. Do you think that's the final point? Anything else you want to touch on, Chase?
No, man, that's my standpoint. Okay. I have yet to see Now, granted, maybe there's someone along the way that has some fucked up shit with like their ankles or their Achilles, and I need to maybe modify, but not do 5 different things in order for them to get enough ankle mobility to squat. It may be some small minor tweaks, but until that day, I'm still going to go with not care.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to not care the best I can. Keep it as simple as possible, everybody. And then for
Yep.
everybody who just popped in, by the way, if you want to get videos on the show, where's that email? Email that support@strength.club. We do user form checks. We do a lot of them. So send those in. And then what do you want to talk about next time, Jason? Anything coming to your brain after this?
I don't know, man. I can't really think of anything.
All right, we'll think on it. We got a whole week to figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, see everybody. Bye.